Welcome into Wager Talk's Last Call. I'm Meghan Payton. Happy Saturday morning. This is a great show with a fun format. If you're new here, where the audience gets involved to the YouTube live chat. Head over to the live chat right now if you have any last minute questions for the Saturday slate. We're going to have a crew of panel members joining us to break down college basketball, NBA. We even have baseball starting right now. A huge weekend in UFC with our main event later on tonight. And our first handicapper joining us today is Jimmy Adams. Jimmy Adams here to break down college basketball, but also give us a little insight with MLB, which is coming up very shortly. Jimmy, how are you today? You have been doing fantastic, 55% in college basketball this season. You have been 63.3% the last 60 days, or the last 65% plays. So explain to everyone what you have going on at Wager Talk.
Yeah, I'm so stoked. Thanks for having me on, Megan. Going to be a huge day. I have 5 plays locked and loaded, ready to go. It's time. March Madness is here, and I'm ready to go on a huge run. Keep an eye out for those 5%ers. They've treated us extremely well over the past year. But let's focus on today and make a bunch of money. I'm excited.
Well, there's a lot of action going around in college basketball as we kind of end the regular season here. So, reminder to all that are watching, listening right now, Jimmy can answer all of your college basketball questions. We can even talk some MLB. Get in the chat. I'll break down some games with him, and then we'll ask you guys. One game that you're looking at, Jimmy, today is going to be the 12th ranked Tennessee at Auburn. Tip off at 2 p.m. Eastern. Auburn's 1.5 point favorites. This is kind of switched a little bit. The total at 128.5. This is a good bounce back spot for Auburn here. That's how I approach this one. Auburn has the ability to defend the 3-point line. I like their spot here. How do you approach this one?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Megan. This line has flipped, and I'm going to let you know why. So Auburn's coming into this game pissed off after the overtime loss against rival Alabama, right? After that game, Bruce Pearl went on kind of a rant complaining about the foul differential, and that has an impact. I mean, the refs won't admit it, but we can expect them to get more calls here, especially with them playing at home. So look, there's no doubt that Tennessee's defense is great. But the loss of Zakai Ziegler is huge, and that's the main reason this line is flipped. Anytime you lose a point guard, it's going to be extremely disruptive of the offense for any team. And in Tennessee's case, it's disrupting an offense that already isn't very impressive. Look, Ziegler is one of the top scorers. He's obviously one of the top assist guys. The offense runs through the point guard position, and I don't think that Rick Barnes has a very good plan for how to replace him. For a couple seasons now, Auburn has played tremendously at home. For whatever reason, they're so much better on their home court, and that holds true again this year, 13-2 at home this season. There are some trends also that suggest Auburn is the right side. First of all, unranked home favorites versus ranked opponents are hitting at a 67% clip against the spread this season. And then if you want to dive deeper and you look at the SEC in particular, home favorites straight up 61-17. That's 78% in conference play. And that's all we need is the straight up victory here. I'm recommending a money line play. Look, I expect Auburn to come out pissed off, like I said, on fire from the start. This Tennessee team is going to be trying to adjust and learn how to play without their point guard. And this is not a good game for them to do it. Auburn's going to win this game, Megan.
Jimmy, for the rest of the slate in college basketball, as we approach March Madness, any other games that are sticking out to you today?
Look, I really am interested to see what happens in the UCLA Arizona game. I think Arizona is a team that's playing pretty well right now. I believe they just went and beat USC. Now they're crossing town playing a similar style. USC very good at defense. UCLA obviously hangs their hat on defense. They're the better team, so it'll be interesting to see what Arizona can do if they can. They're kind of playing for pride here. They already beat him at home once, and we're going to see if they can do it again this time on the road. So I'm interested in that game. And there's a few more on the card that I have circled, but most of those are client plays.
Jimmy, let's switch to MLB because the baseball action is about to get real hot. We've got action going on in 2022. You were the top MLB capper. How do you approach betting on baseball, and what is your strategy for this season?
So yeah, look, first of all, I'm just real quick, I'm in agreement with all the pitching change, the rules changes. I think we need to speed up the game. I know that wasn't the question, but I'm on board with that. As far as how I approach betting baseball, look, you want to look for line value. Don't put too much emphasis on starting pitching. If you do see a starting pitcher that you like, a first five line is always a good way to go. Run lining, not necessarily a bad idea. It could be kind of square at times, but like for instance, last season the Dodgers were by far the best run line team in the league, and you didn't have to put much thought and effort into betting them, consistently there. That was a moneymaker. So I'm studying on these teams right now. I'll have more insight in the coming weeks, but look for value in underdogs. I'm a streak better as well, Megan, in baseball. So I don't step in front of teams that are on losing streaks, and I'm all over teams that have won. If you can catch a team that's won three, four in a row, and you just ride them and ride them and ride them until they lose, I do that as long as you're getting good value, and I don't go above the minus 150 mark. You don't want to get too out of hand with the juice. So there's a couple tips and pointers. Hopefully that helps.
It does. And we've got questions coming in on YouTube. Vegas wants to know if you have any thoughts on Kansas, Texas over total sitting at 148 and a half. Third ranked Kansas taking on the ninth ranked Texas.
Oh boy. This was a complete pass for me. I think that sharp money has come in on Texas, if I'm correct. And I don't know that I trust the Longhorns in this spot. It should be a good game. I don't want to lay the points. And as far as the total, I really don't have a strong opinion. So I'm sure that maybe Trig will have a better answer. He's coming up next.
Jimmy, we appreciate your breakdown of Tennessee and Auburn, also giving us a little MLB insight. You can find Jimmy at wagertalk.com. He was 38 and 22 the last 65% plays, 55% in the college basketball season, and the number one MLB handicapper in 2022. Thank you very much for joining us here Saturday morning at Last Call. Up next, we're going to bring on another handicapping expert, which is Adam Trigger. He's been betting the last decade. He goes around all different kind of sports, but we're going to break down some of his college basketball thoughts today. So, Adam, welcome into Wager Talk's Last Call. You've been red hot lately on 11 and 2 run the last 7 days. What's going on? What do you have up at Wager Talk?
Thanks for having me, Megan. So I'm gonna have a pretty busy day of college hoop. There's a lot of games. I would say probably at least four plays in total for today, maybe a fifth. Um, Best way to get them all. March Madness package is up now. It's everything through the Final Four. So that's gonna be, I mean, from a value standpoint, it's probably one of the best packages we offer all year. And for today, I've locked three plays in so far. As soon as we get off the show, I'm probably going to lock in a fourth. So should be a pretty busy day. And yeah, like you said, 11 and 2 last 13 college basketball plays, and I'm going to give one of those plays out on the show.
I want to go back before we get into the game that you're going to break down, Adam. Vegas asked Kansas, Texas totals at 148 and a half. Do you like the over in that matchup?
Megan, I'm not. I don't consider myself a very good totals handicapper. I have yet to release a total all year. I don't really bet them. I rarely have opinions on totals, but I can give you an opinion on the side here, and the way I kind of see the game. I do like Texas. Megan, I saw Texas play a week ago at Baylor down in Waco. They played awful. Honestly, I thought it was one of the worst games that they played all season. They missed open shot after open shot. So I have to think that that maybe comes back a little bit. If you're talking about total, maybe, you know, Texas starts to shoot it a little bit better because they didn't shoot it particularly well against TCU on Wednesday night in what ended up being their second straight loss. So now they come back home. At home, they are 16 and 1 this year. So they clearly shot the ball better at home. And I do think you get some. I Let's just put it this way: I think we're going to see positive regression in general from Texas. So I would lay the points with Texas if you're going to get involved with the side. And as far as the total, if we expect their offense to play a little bit better, I guess I could see it going over. But again, don't take my word for the totals. I'm not a totals handicapper. I just think that we will see Texas, come back to the mean a little bit. Back-to-back losses for a top 10 team, and now they're at home. It seems like a good spot to buy in on Texas, and buying in on Texas probably means they're going to score some points.
94% of the money on the over, 81% of the tickets. So that is where the public is headed. C. James says, Trigger, where are you watching the games today with that curse orange on?
Megan, I will be watching that game at the Carrier Dome. I'm heading to the game today. It's 5 p.m. They are honoring the 2003 national championship team. So, like, Carmelo's in the building. All the guys are there. They were all there last night. They did some sort of big dinner. Um, McNamara is going to get his jersey retired. I believe they're going to retire Hakeem Marks as well. So it should be a fun day at the Dome. And it's a good segue here, Megan, because Syracuse is a 4% play for me. It's one of my best bets of the day. It's the game I'm going to talk about on the show. And I guess we'll start there. This is a big game for Syracuse from the respect that this game means a lot to the program. I already talked about it. They've got the 2003 team in attendance, the last time Syracuse won a national championship game. And if you're not from this area, I mean, they hold on to that national championship 20 years ago like it happened yesterday. That tells you a little bit about the state of Syracuse basketball. But man, that is growing up in upstate New York, that like that was like a historic team for this whole area, even as far out as where I grew up in like Albany, Schenectady. So from a standpoint of this game meaning something, it means a lot to Syracuse, and I just can't see it meaning a whole lot to Wake Forest. They lost to Boston College. It's kind of they're not going to get an at-large at this point, Megan. So this is really like an inconvenience for Wake Forest,
Yeah.
if you ask me, having to come up to Central New York to play a game that's really not going to change their status. Wake Forest, they're going to have to be ready for the ACC tournament. That is their only chance to go to the NCAA tournament this year. So I can't see them like maybe play, they may extend their rotation a little bit, not play all of their not burn out their starters, knowing that in a few days they're going to have to go rattle off 3-4 wins in consecutive days to get to the NCAA tournament. On top of the spot, I love the matchup here for Syracuse for a couple of reasons. One, Damari Monsanto was Wake Forest's best shooter. He goes down with a knee injury that ends his season. And as you know, Megan, to beat Syracuse, you got to be able to shoot the ball. They sit in the zone, and he is their best floor spacer and their best shooter. And I think that we saw his absence show up in the last couple games. The loss to Boston College specifically, their offense just isn't as good without him, and their offense is really going to struggle, in my opinion, spacing the floor against the zone without Monsanto in there and without he's the best 3-point shooter on the team. So his loss is huge. Another reason I love this matchup for Syracuse is Wake Forest doesn't play a lick of defense. They don't contest shots, and they're particularly soft on the inside, which is where Jesse Edwards should eat this. He's a great scorer when you're not real physical with him, Megan. Like if he can get inside and do what he wants, he'll score 20 and he can be really effective. If you've got big men that are very physical and are going to meet him at the rim, he'll struggle. Wake Forest does not have that. Their bigs are just not physical bigs. They're gonna, they prefer to play a little bit further away from the rim. They're not gonna go down there and bang with him on the inside. So I think Edwards is gonna have a good game. And Syracuse does have some scores. Joe Girard can shoot it. When Joe Girard gets hot, he can kind of go off. And Wake Forest, as far from a shot contesting perspective, is as bad as you're gonna find in this league. I think that's really going to hurt them today in a game that Syracuse might be a little bit more up for. If we've got two teams that are relatively even in quote unquote a meaningless game, one team really cares, one team doesn't, and you're going to put 25,000 in the dome behind that team. Megan, and you're going to give them to me at a pick. I got to be on Syracuse. The 4-game losing streak has been ugly, but I think they get one here. It's just a one-off game that doesn't mean a ton in the standings, but is a really big, important game for Syracuse as a program, and really kind of an afterthought for Wake Forest. So I will be on Syracuse -110. at a pick. 4% play for me. I fully expect them to win at the Dome today.
I'm with you, Trig. This has been a terrible defensive stretch for Syracuse, but a special night for them. Senior night, wrapping up the regular season. This tips off 7 or 5 p.m. Eastern. It's essentially a pick'em game. Total at 156.5. Adam, what about Power Five tournament futures bets? Are you dabbling in that market at all?
I will. Megan, every year I say I don't really bet conference tournament futures, and then I end up with like 5 conference tournament futures bets. I have in the smaller conferences right now. I still have Youngstown State going. I still have South Alabama to win the Sun Belt. Those are some of the smaller ones that I played that I talked about on Wager Talk programming last week. Now, as the bigger conferences wrap up, we're going to start getting into the bigger conferences. I'll throw one out there. If you may know this already, if you listen to our spaces, I gotta credit my buddy Chris Thurston, CT Betts, co-host of Hustle Show Pod with myself, Kelly Stewart, and Drew Martin Betts for this info. Um, but he gave a breakdown on Baylor to win the Big 12 tournament and why they're going to care so much about it this year. Because it's kind of the one thing these seniors haven't done. These seniors have won a Big 12 regular season title. They've won a national championship, but they've never really played well in the Big 12 tournament. And I thought he made some really good points there. So I will have a Baylor to win the Big 12 tournament ticket in my pocket. And I guess I'll go back to the ACC for a minute, Megan. I feel like suddenly Virginia's kind of becoming an afterthought. I don't know what kind of price we'll get on them. I haven't really looked into it, but Virginia's really kind of just like struggled down the stretch here. I I still think give teams a couple days off, a couple days to prepare for a conference tournament, and you get all those teams on a neutral floor. I still don't know that there's anyone better than Virginia in that conference. Like I know you've got people are high on Miami right now. Duke is starting to finally come around, but that is a really bad conference, and I still think even with sort of the poor play of late, that Virginia might be the best option there, and they might not be priced like the best option, which is obviously the key when you're talking about tournament futures. We're really hunting for a number because, as you know, anything can really happen in 3 days and 3 games in 3 days, 4 games in 4 days. But if you can find a good value number, I think we'll probably get a good number on Baylor because, of course, you're going to have Texas, Kansas, and a lot of other teams in the Big 12 that are all kind of sucking up that value. And the same thing for Virginia. I would probably say a couple weeks ago they would have been the favorite in this tournament. Now you've got Miami coming into the picture. People are high on Duke again. So I would say Virginia might be a good look in the ACC tournament. And then I'll throw one more out there. This is more of a flyer, but I like Penn State in the Big Ten at a big price. They were a team I was super high on this year coming into the season. They they have a huge game coming up tomorrow against Maryland, where if they can win that game, they'd have a good chance at playing their way into an at-large spot if they have success in the Big Ten tournament. If Even if they lose, though, I think they're going to need to win a couple games. They have Jalen Pickett, who I still consider to be the best point guard in the country, leading that team. And Megan, they shoot a lot of threes. They make a lot of threes. They make their foul shots. They seem to be a team that could get hot on a neutral floor, and they'd be a team that no one in that conference really wants to play against. If they can get the right draw out there, I think Penn State at a big price might be dangerous in the Big Ten.
One last question for you, Trig. John wants to know Providence today taking on Seton Hall at 9 a.m. So in about what, 30 minutes? Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I lean their way. I talked about this on Wednesday. Providence, they got they lose to Xavier on Wednesday in a game where they did kind of come back, but they were down big in that game. And the one thing I said when I broke down the Providence Xavier game, or at least chimed in on the breakdown, was, I don't know if I trust Providence as a favorite at home against another ranked team, because the last 2 years they've had unreal home numbers the last 2 years, but typically in the bigger games they're the hunter, right? Like they're the underdog, not necessarily the hunted. On Wednesday, those roles reversed. Xavier came in. Providence was the favorite, and they kind of got killed. This is the spot where I prefer Providence at home in this spot. Favorite when if they're going to be a favorite at home, I want it to be against a lesser team. So I do think Providence has a pretty good chance to bounce back here. Seton Hall, Shaheen Holloway, their head coach, comes from St. Peter's, which is in my conference. I say my conference because I went to Siena, Megan. He just comes from the back. Um, I think he's a year away from getting his sort of system in place. The one, obviously, we all know St. Peter's last year, Elite Eight, Cinderella run, incredible story. But the way he wants to play defensive, slow the game down, I still don't think Seton Hall fully has that. Like sometimes they'll be able to execute and they'll play a really good game. And by really good game, I mean they'll slow their opponent down, they'll make it ugly, and they'll get a win. But I don't know that they can do that here on the road. So I would lean toward Providence there. Not a super strong lean for me. You're still having a lay 7.5, but it does seem like a spot where Providence probably bounces back and wins. And if they win, they most likely cover.
Big Providence about an 8.5 point favorite right now. I lied to you. Andrew has a question, so we're getting all of your college basketball takes right now. Quick question about Auburn money line at home in revenge on Senior Day.
Yeah, I won't go too far into this one. I also don't care it's the Senior Day. I think that's an overrated angle. I think it probably hits about 50% of the time. But yeah, just long story short, I do lean Auburn here. If I think our space is still up from earlier, go to Kelly Stewart's Twitter because it should be archived. We actually did a pretty big breakdown of Auburn. Mark Zinno, Kelly Stewart, Chris Thurston, myself. We talked about that one. But yeah, long story short, I lean their way. I like Auburn.
Adam Trigger, we appreciate you here at Wager Talk Last Call, giving us all the leans, all the edges for this college basketball slate. Adam Trigger, 11-2 the last 7 days. Go find him up at wagertalk.com. Enjoy your Saturday. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Megan. If you're at the Dome, shoot me a DM. Come say hi. I'll be there all afternoon. Hopefully, we're all leaving with Syracuse.
Absolutely. Let's switch over to hockey. NHL handicapper Andrew McInnis is going to break down some of the action going on the ice tonight. Welcome in, Andrew. Thank you for joining us here this morning. You have been 70% plus 50 units the last 35% plays. What do you have going on at wagertalk.com?
Well, thank you for having me. Great to see you. And look, when I look at this NHL board, I'm chomping at the bit. I'm trying not to release too many plays as I've had success being rather low volume. But I've got two best bets so far as the NHL slate is concerned. A free play that I will give out today on the show, and a jam-packed UFC slate that I'm looking forward to tonight as well. I've got 5 plays tonight in the UFC.
Well, this is a reminder right now for all tuning into this show. Get into the YouTube live. Let's take advantage of Andrew's time here at Last Call. Any NHL questions you have, huge event in UFC with their main card tonight. Let's break it all down. First game that you're eyeing is the Edmonton Oilers at the Winnipeg Jets. The Oilers won last night 6-3. Puck drop at 7 p.m. Eastern tonight. The Oilers are minus 138 on the money line, and the total's at 7. Any leans in this one?
So, Megan, you don't really see this too often in the NHL, but sometimes you will come across these home and home scenarios where, of course, they played in Edmonton last night. Now they travel back to Winnipeg. And to me, last night was the spot for Winnipeg. Last night was the spot that they should have had more success in. Falling in Edmonton in a game like that, but falling in a game that Connor McDavid didn't even have that great of a game is a concern for me. I mean, we always talk about the Edmonton Oilers, that they have depth issues, that there's only a couple guys that do all the scoring. But when I look at this team and I see all kinds of guys contributing, looking down the roster, seeing several guys with 2 or 3 shots, Nugent Hopkins playing well, Draisaitl with 2 goals. To me, I always look towards the other way. If the first game of a home and home goes over, I look towards the under. If one team wins, I try and find a case to bet on the team that lost. But I'm not going to overthink this, Megan. I like the over once again in this game. I mean, both teams are scoring right now, especially this Edmonton Oilers team. And one thing I always say across all sports, the better team dictates the total. I use that in NBA. I use that in NFL, especially in the NHL. Look, long-term, Winnipeg is an under team, but Edmonton is most certainly carrying the pace when it comes to this game. They've gone over in 8 of their last 11 games. 5 of their last or 5 straight games on the road, and 10 of their last 14 games against Winnipeg have gone over the total. You know, this is going to be a very desperate spot for Winnipeg because they're going to try and get back on track, but I simply do not think they can do it against Edmonton. unless they put up 3 or 4 goals. So, like I said, they have one night to make some changes. How many changes can a team really make, Meghan, in one night? How much film can you watch? How many adjustments can a coach really give you before you go to sleep, and then you're off playing the exact same team the next day? So I'll go over 6.5, Winnipeg and Edmonton.
How about New York, Detroit? Other Andrew wants to know. Andrew, I'm laying big juice with the Islanders. Convince me otherwise. Detroit heads to New York today. You can get minus 200 on the Islanders, and its totals about 6 right now. Any leans on this one?
I love how that question was phrased. I kind of feel like Teddy right now on Wager Talk today, asking the contrarian question. Being the contrarian,
Right.
because look, this is kind of the way I look at it. He said, "I'm laying big juice with the Islanders. Convince me otherwise." And in simple form, the way I would convince you otherwise is I don't think that the Islanders deserve that price. It was like
Yeah.
such a perfectly asked question. I'm not trying to, just say I completely disagree with the team you're picking. But from a value standpoint, I'm not really too high on laying that kind of price there with the New York Islanders. One thing for certain, Meghan, we talk about this across all sports. When you look at a team post trade deadline, the trade deadline was yesterday in the NHL. A lot of times, you don't want to rush to the window to bet against these teams that just traded their players away. It's kind of like the old injured player theory, right? One player gets injured, a star player. The next day, everyone bets against them, and all of a sudden that team wins outright or they cover the number. This is kind of how I approach this today with Detroit. They just lost a couple of key players, very key players, to the trade deadline. Of course, they're a few years away from being in contention, so they're trying to stock up on draft picks and things like that. So I do think we'll see some of the guys down the end of the roster step up and take some of their places. Of course, the Islanders are searching for a playoff spot right now, but I simply just don't like the minus 200. I would recommend a team total or regulation or something like that. My play on that game would actually be the over.
Brandon wants to talk a little props with you. Shots on goal props for this slate of NHL?
I mean, when I looked at this board initially, there's all kinds of guys that I'm continuously betting. It's funny you ask, because I talked with Andy Lang about this, and one thing that I've learned from him and all kinds of other people when I look at this slate is that you kind of have to just pick a handful of guys and continuously look at them. One guy that I have constantly been looking at, and I mean, like, I've bet on him several games in a row, and that's Tim Stützle from the Ottawa Senators. I'm trying to pull up his numbers right now so I can get the exact percentages, but yeah, he has hit in 9 of his last 10 games over 2.5 shots on goal. His number went from all minus 120 to minus 135 to 140. That number has gone up. It's shot up completely. But here's the thing. With shots on goal props, I understand everybody has their own juice tolerance, what they're willing to lay. But that 2.5 number is so key. It's like in the NFL, getting that 6.5 versus the 7.5. I look at this number of 2.5, and I'm going to continue to ride with Tim Stützle as long as I possibly can. And one of the biggest reasons for that, Columbus's defense ranks 30th in the league in shots on goal allowed per game. Now, you can look at other Ottawa Senators players like Brady Tkachuk, Claude Giroux, different players like that. But overall, when I'm looking at this board, he's someone that stuck out to me right away. And then another guy, Tyler Toffoli, he's hit in 18 of his last 20 games. He's gone over his shots on goal prop. And one more guy I wanted to mention was Boone Jenner for the Columbus Blue Jackets. So one thing funny about the NHL and just in general leagues where you see, at certain teams, I don't know if I want to use the word tanking, but post-trade deadline, you kind of get that feeling of which teams are going in what direction, Meghan. A lot of people love to just bet on the good teams, the player props from the great teams, right? But here's the thing. In an NBA game, a team could lose by 20, but guess what? Somebody still had to score for the losing team, right? In the NHL, you might think the Columbus Blue Jackets are going to lose 4-1 today, but guess what? They still have to get shots on goal. Somebody has to go out there and produce offense for them. And that's kind of what I'm looking at in my approach for this game with Boone Jenner. So I'm looking at him. He's over 2.5. I've gotten away from the 4.5s and the 3.5s because I just feel like so much has to go right to be able to hit those. So just a couple I like there. And I see some questions coming in about Patrick Kane and Victor Hedman. Sorry, I didn't mean to take over there, Megan. I
No,
just saw the
good. No,
question,
this is the show. This is we let the YouTube live audience kind of narrate this. I'm just the talking head in between. Brandon wants to know Victor Hedman, Patrick Kane, shots on goals. Any thoughts? That one.
So one thing about Patrick Kane is that I've been saying this about the New York Rangers. I feel like they have almost too many leaders and not enough followers. And what I mean by that is that I feel like there's almost too many mouths to feed on that team. There's too many superstars, which I guess most people that are Rangers fans probably wouldn't say is a bad thing. But I will just warn people, if you are a prop bettor, be aware, because guess what? There could be 6 guys on that team in the forward group tonight that end on 2 shots on goal, because there's not just one player that's going to do all the shooting. Whereas some teams, you might just already know that guy's going to do a lot of the shooting. That guy's going to get the puck a lot. But with this Rangers team, I feel like every single day it could be a new guy being explosive. As far as Victor Hedman, I'm looking at a lot of these offensive defensemen, so I would not talk anybody off looking at him. And one thing cool about betting defensemen and their props, you always get better prices on them because nobody ever thinks of them. But defensemen like him, they're out there on the power play. They're moving the puck up the ice. They always get those assists, and they're always shooting the puck. So just my 2 cents there. But look, I'm not saying Patrick Kane's a bad bet, but there's so many all-stars on that team that it just might not be his day. He could have 5 shots, but there's also 5 other superstars for them to get their shots as well.
Andrew, let's switch over to UFC. We've got tons of questions coming in about the main card, but also Cody Garbrandt versus Trevin Jones tonight, 9:36 p.m. Eastern, minus 174 on Garbrandt. What are your thoughts there? I believe there was a total question. Oh, they says, Fall 3 and Chaos says, are you on a side or over in the underrounds?
You know,
Side or over, yeah, underrounds.
Yeah, I have a jam-packed card in the UFC, and this one didn't make my card. I didn't have a strong opinion on it, honestly, and I don't want to give something out that I didn't really, have a thought on. But of course, I did have a lean, and my lean would be the under here. I mean, in my opinion, you've got Garbrandt that, as much as if he fights smart, he can avoid danger. He can avoid putting himself in tough situations. But you put these 2 guys together, I think from the start of this fight, it's going to be a brawl. One person gets touched in the chin, I think this one could be over. So even though in their weight division, sometimes we could see things go a little bit longer, Megan, I think this one could actually end early. It's a big fight for Cody, but I think it's going to be a knockout or a bust for him. And by doing that, it'll put him in tough situations. So I'll take the under on the rounds for that one.
And how about the main card tonight, Andrew? What are your leans there?
Well, look, a free play that I did and an article play that I had up was on the main event, which is nice because a lot of people are kind of like selling plays in the main event, and that's kind of a play that people kind of keep quiet. So I was pretty happy that a play that I've been kind of talking about all the time is the main event there. John Bone Jones, he's back, and the hype is real. Everyone's been waiting for it. It's been several years now. Cyril Gahn has been unbelievable as well, though. And one thing about Gahn is he's very precise. He's very patient. He does not really put himself in too dangerous of situations. He uses those leg kicks. He separates himself. But in this fight in general, I expect lots of grappling, lots of tie-ups. And look, John Jones, one thing I like about him, he's just so well-rounded. Everyone calls him the GOAT for a reason. I don't think he excels specifically at one thing. He's just so well-rounded at all of what he does. He's undefeated besides, disqualifications or steroids and pretty much other reasons besides somebody actually beating him, Megan. So this guy has a pretty good track record besides pretty much him beating himself. Jones won 7 of his last 9 fights via decision. That's 78%. And Cyril Gahn is a guy that just can't be finished. So where am I going with this? I like John Jones to get the victory in his return to the UFC tonight. But I want to look at method of victory and look at John Jones via decision. Let the judges do the talking for us at plus 165. Important to mention that when that price opened up at some books, that was up to plus 195, now down to plus 165. So hoping John Jones gets it done, but I do think this one goes the distance.
Andrew, it wouldn't be a last call episode if someone wasn't throwing shade in the comments. Vegas, Andrew with the better hair than Carm. Andrew, we appreciate you joining us here at Last Call. Reminder, you can find him over at WagerTalk.com. 21 and 9 to 70% run plus 50 units, the last 35% plays. Thank you very much for joining us. and enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
Thanks so much. You too.
Bryan Power, unable to join us today, but he wanted us to give out his free play for the show. He'll be back next week. Bryan Power was looking at Kentucky versus Arkansas, also Kansas State versus West Virginia, and he's got a money line parlay. He's taken Arkansas plus West Virginia on the money line, parlay that. And if you guys want to get more info from Bryan, check out what he's got going over at wagertalk.com. He's number one with 5% plays, 11-3 since late December. He's hitting 67% on all sports this week. We're bummed that he's not here today, but we're still appreciative of his free play. We're here every week, Thursdays and Saturdays, Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern and Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern. We love this new show. It's all about getting the audience involved. We appreciate you joining us each and every week. Enjoy your weekend. Go cash some tickets. We'll see you next time on Last Call.